State Special Jury Award in 2011. Welcome C.S. Venkateswaran to the panel discussion. Dilip Raj, teacher, philosophy at Government Brennan College, Thalassery, authored a book on news historian published by DC Books, edited a cultural studies magazine in Malayalam, Pachakudira, for 2 years, and worked as editor in Penguin Books, Malayalam, for 5 years. I welcome all the panelists and the moderator to the dais.
A warm welcome to this second session today towards unearthed cultural symbiosis and the secular fabric of India. I think we are already late, so I won't waste much time. I think the title itself, these words, unearthed cultural symbiosis and also secular fabric, are very evocative words which have a long history in India, like of being a lot of long history of cultural symbiosis as well as dissonance. So this whole question of unearthed or questioning the borders or transgressing, crossing the borders, or are borders necessary? All these questions I think relate both to cultural symbiosis as well as the whole question of the secular fabric of India, which many see is under threat. I think the panelists, writers, poets, critics, I think they will dwell upon these issues, take up various aspects of all these questions of unearthed cultural symbiosis as well as secularism. So I think without wasting much time, and I'll come back to my comments later, I think I'll start with C.S. Lakshmi, who is my soul sister. We share the same initials, same expansion of Chittu Subramaniam. So I welcome Lakshmi to. We will have one first round of observations, then we'll go back to specific themes. Yeah, Lakshmi.
Thank you, Venkateswaran. The idea of unearthed, going beyond the boundaries, was not something that we deliberately thought of until the 92-93 riots in Gujarat and the following events in Bombay. For the first time, we realized that we were all exposed to a mind that was completely bound. So after this, Sparrow, the organization to which I belong, we held communal harmony workshops. The first communal harmony workshop we held was for students, and we showed them several films, and then we asked the students to talk about what their experiences. And one boy, he got up and told that it took him a lot of time to convince his parents that he wanted to come for a communal harmony workshop. He told me that his father told him, don't go to a communal harmony workshop where they will tell you nice things about Muslims and Christians. And finally, he had to come for the workshop without telling his parents. And he said that coming to the workshop had changed him a lot. And he started understanding what he should do in future for this communal harmony. There were several such instances that happened in Bombay. There was a Muslim gentleman who was a bread seller. He had a bakery. In a particular street where all communities lived. And on a particular day during riot, there was a bandh. So he thought that all his clients will go without bread. So he went on a cycle and started distributing bread. And the youths of that locality killed him. They beat him up and lynched him. This was seen by one boy who was part of that group but not participated in the lynching. So he went and told the party that was doing, encouraging this kind of lynching, that this old man was such a nice person, why did we have to kill him? They said that in such a large mass mob action, somebody innocent will also have to die. So he tried his best to help this old man's family. What he did was he applied for a shop in his own name, and then he gave it to the son of that man who died. All these questions came up, and Asghar Ali Engineer had organized a long march of 20 kilometers in which many of us participated. And we saw those burnt cars and dead animals and so many things. And that's when we realized that all of us must understand that language. And that is when I fell back upon reading the Sufi saints and the early Bhakti literature like Basavanna and Akkamadevi and all much more deeply. Rahmat has done research on Sufism, so he'll tell you much more. But among the Sufi saints, the person who appealed to me most was Kabir. And many of us began to go back to Kabir, like Neela Bhagwat began to sing Kabir. And wherever she went, she sang Kabir. So we realized that we have to have a very different language that's not bound in any particular kind of identity. And one verse of Kabir, which one of the parts of Kabir that appealed to me most was this, which I will read out and I'll also translate. I won't read out the whole thing in Hindi because nobody will understand. It's not in Hindi. Moko kahan dhunde re bande, main to tere paas mein. This is this one. He says, na teerth mein, na murat mein, na ekant nivas mein. Neither in Kaaba nor in Kailash. I am with you, O man. I am with you. Not in prayers, not in meditation, neither in fasting, not in yogic postures, neither in renunciation, neither in the vital force, nor in the body, not even in the ethereal space. neither in the womb of nature, not in the breath of breath. Seek earnestly and discover. In but a moment of search, says Kabir, listen with care. Where your faith is, I am there. So where do we put the faith in? That was the question. And the question that we constantly had to ask was, what was this boundary that we are talking of? So for that also, Kabir has an answer. He says, Had tape so awliya, behad tape so peer, had anhad tape so wakon fakir. It means one who works within boundaries is an awliya, is a teacher. One who works without boundaries is a peer, is a saint. And one who is both bound and boundless is a fakir, is a person who knows how to deal with boundaries and also how to go beyond boundaries. So the whole question of boundaries comes up with Kabir. And the Sufis have earlier, very early, during the time of Rumi and even before Rumi, they have asked questions of what is identity. So there was one Mahmoud Sabistari. So he asked, what is a mosque and what is a synagogue? What is a fire temple? I and you are the veils the devil casts between them. But lift the veils and with them disappears the bonds of sects and creeds that imprison us. So we are imprisoned. So how do we live the veils? So the Sufis and others have given us the answers. But the question is, have we been using the right language in understanding them and communicating with them? And I feel this question of what language of secularism we use. What's the language? Do we use the language that says that you tolerate all sex? Or do we do without all symbols? So when these our organization's new building we inaugurated, we decided that we won't light lamps and we won't break coconuts. So what we did was, we did it during dusk time and we lit up a lot of candles and we put off all the lights on all the 3 floors and we walked up to the floors with candles and then we put on the lights. So a lot of people who watched us, because we lit candles, they asked, why did you light candles? Are you Christians? So we realized that everything has an association. Everything is symbolized. There is nothing without boundaries. So it's possible we are not using the right language and people are not understanding us. Like Ghalib, so many years ago, so many centuries ago, he said that Ya Rab, na samjhe mujhe meri baat. Ya de dil unko aur, jaan de mujhe zaban aur. People who don't understand me, give them a different heart, or at least give me a different language so that I can make them understand. This Cherub Ghalib keeps coming back to me because I feel that this is the language people like us who are grown up post-independence are asking us now. Which is the language we have to use so that these kind of communal caste and other identities can disappear.
Thank you, Ms. Lakshmi, for putting it in perspective and also to link contemporary experiences of legacy of Kabir, and also asking this very relevant question about what is the language of secularism? What are his contemporary cultural practices? How do we actually realize cultural symbiosis in our cultural practice and language, which I think is a very important question. I will now move on to Rahmat Tarikere, who has done a lot of work in the Sufi tradition and a poet from Canada. Yeah.
Thank you, Venkateshan. I firstly thank to Sive too and Hamakanka for inviting me to this beautiful festival. I have come from Pampa Sarovara. I have come from Hampi, where Tungabhadra flows, and there is a Pampa Sarovara. And Parvati is called Pampambike. So I have come from Pampa to Pampa. I am very happy to participate here. Yes, basically I started my writing career as a literary critic. After 92, after Ayodhya issue, I was deeply disturbed. And I felt there's no use of writing literary criticism. So then I began to search something which with aspiration that there must be some medicine in our community life, in our tradition, in our history. So basically, I'm a trespasser. I'm not a student of philosophy or history or religions, but I try to cross my academic barrier, discipline barrier. So throughout India, I roamed and I wrote a book on Sufism. From that book, I have been exploring this kind of syncretic culture, mixed culture. Recently, I worked on Amir Bhai Karnataki, who sang so many wonderful songs on Krishna, Ab Tere Siva Mere Koi Krishna Kanaya, etc. My mother was an Arabic teacher. She was a great fan of Rajkumar movies. And she has a great friend called Pattammal. She is supposed to be Tamil. I still remember, she never felt a contradiction. Teaching Arabic, going with Pattammal to Rajkumar cinema, she never faced any threats or she never faced any contradictions. But now, this is difficult to assume in my village, in my area. What happened to our, this kind of taking and giving, and this liberal values? This makes me always very disturbed. What would happen to our children? Because we are moving towards intolerant. So we are trying to create intolerant society. So I don't know whether I'm doing all this research desperately because our rational movements, our progressive movements have failed to check and control the fanaticism and communalism in India. I think being a writer, helplessly, desperately, I am doing this research. But I don't know whether there is a remedy in my research. I don't know. But I am doing. This is the only mean I have to counter and dream a better India. Better India. Because particularly in northern Karnataka, there are that kind of syncretic culture is very abundant. I would like to quote 2 or 3 things. In northern Karnataka, we see so many Guru Paramparas are in Sufis, where Guru belongs to some other religion and Shishya belongs to other. For example, Shishinal Sharif, a very famous mystic poet, his Guru is supposed to be Govinda Bhatta. In 14th century, there was a great Sufi called Aminuddin Allah, who belongs to Anhat philosophy. He belongs to Al-Haq philosophy. Al-Haq philosophy. Al-Haq means Aham Brahmasmi. Actually, in 10th century, Sufi, one of the Sufis who came to India and learned from Advaita philosophy. So in Sufism, we see there's no had, there are no borders to learn, there is no any control or checks to become Shishya or become Guru. This Guru Parampara also reflects in our festivals. For example, in Moharram, in northern Karnataka, we don't see even single family in a village, but the Moharram ritual is beautifully they celebrate. My question, I'm asking myself, whether this kind of research will help us, in what way it will help to build. This is my question. I don't have answer.
Thank you, Rahmat. So I think there is a demand for a Malayalam translation of what was being said. I'll just briefly summarize it. C.S. ലക്ഷ്മി പറയാൻ ശ്രമിച്ചത് ഒരു സമകാലിക അനുഭവത്തിൽ നിന്ന്, ചരിത്ര സംഭവത്തിൽ നിന്ന് തുടങ്ങി, ഗുജറാത്ത് പോലുള്ളൊരു എക്സ്പീരിയൻസിൽ നിന്ന്, ഒരു അനുഭവത്തിൽ നിന്ന് തുടങ്ങി, അതിൻ്റെ ഒരു അന്വേഷണത്തിൻ്റെ ഭാഗമായി അതിൻ്റെ മറ്റു തരത്തിലുള്ള എന്തുതരം സെക്കുലർ എന്ന് വിളിക്കപ്പെടുന്ന അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അന്യനെ, അപരത്തെ കുറെക്കൂടി സഹിഷ്ണുതയോടെ നേരിടുന്ന ഒരു സംസ്കാരത്തിൻ്റെ പാരമ്പര്യം എന്നുള്ള അന്വേഷണത്തിൻ്റെ ഭാഗമായി ഉള്ള ഒട്ടേറെ ഫിലിം ഷോ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അത്തരം പരീക്ഷണങ്ങളിലൂടെ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അത്തരം പരിശ്രമങ്ങളിലൂടെ കബീർ പോലുള്ള ഒരു കവിയിലേക്കും അദ്ദേഹം ഉയർത്തിപ്പിടിക്കുന്ന ഈ അൻഹദ് എന്ന് പറയുന്ന അതിർത്തികളില്ലാത്ത അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അതിർത്തികളെ അതിവർത്തിക്കുന്ന, അവർ പറഞ്ഞ അവസാനിപ്പിച്ചത് അതിർത്തികളെ അതിവർത്തിക്കുക എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ അതിർത്തികൾ ഉണ്ട് ജീവിതത്തിൽ. അപ്പോൾ അതിർത്തികളെ അറിയുകയും അതിർത്തികളെ അതിവർത്തിക്കുകയും ചെയ്യാനുള്ള ഒരു ആർജവം, അതിനുള്ള അത് സ്വന്തം ജീവിതത്തിലും പ്രയോഗങ്ങളിലും പ്രകാശനങ്ങളിലും അത് അതിർത്തികളെ അപ്രസക്തമാക്കുന്ന, അതിർത്തികളെ അറിയുകയും മറികടക്കുകയും ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരു അവസ്ഥ ഉണ്ടോ എന്നുള്ളതാണ്. അത് ഒരുപക്ഷെ ഇന്നത്തെ ഇന്ന് ഒരു ഇന്ത്യ പോലുള്ള ഒരു സാംസ്കാരികമായ ഒരു രാഷ്ട്രം നേരിടുന്ന സ്വത്വ പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഇത്തരം അതിരുകളുടെ മറ്റ് പലതരം പ്രകാശനങ്ങളെ എങ്ങനെയാണ് സെക്യുലറിസത്തിൻ്റെ, മതേതരത്വത്തിൻ്റെ സമകാലിക ഭാഷ എന്ത് ഭാഷയിലാണ് ഇന്നത്തെ മതേതരത്വം അന്വേഷിക്കും, മതേതരത്വ രാഷ്ട്രീയം അല്ലെങ്കിൽ മതേതരമായ സാംസ്കാരിക പ്രയോഗങ്ങൾ ളിൽ ഏർപ്പെടാൻ ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്ന നമ്മൾ ഏതുതരം ഭാഷയിലൂടെയാണ് ഇത് ആവിഷ്കരിക്കാൻ പോകുന്നത് എന്നുള്ള വളരെ നിർണായകമായൊരു ചോദ്യമാണ് അവർ ചോദിച്ചത്. റഹ്മത്ത് അതുപോലെ തുടങ്ങിയത് തന്നെ ഇതുപോലെ തന്നെ മറ്റൊരു രീതിയിൽ 90 ബാബരി മസ്ജിദിന് ശേഷമുള്ള ഒരു വല്ലാത്തൊരു ട്രോമാറ്റിക് എന്ന് വിളിക്കാവുന്ന, ആരെയും ഏതൊരു മതേതരത്വത്തിൽ വിശ്വസിക്കുന്ന ഏതൊരാളെയും ഞെട്ടിക്കുന്ന ആ സംഭവത്തിൽ നിന്ന് തുടങ്ങിയ ഒരു ആത്മാന്വേഷണത്തിൻ്റെ ഭാഗമായി ഒരു സ്വന്തം ഉത്തര കർണാടകയിലെ സെക്യുലറായിട്ടുള്ള മതേതരമായ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ മതഭേദങ്ങളില്ലാത്ത പലതരം മതാചാരങ്ങളെക്കുറിച്ചുള്ള അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അത്തരം ഒരു സംസ്കാരത്തിൻ്റെ കവിതയുടെ പ്രകാശനങ്ങൾ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അതിൻ്റെ പാരമ്പര്യങ്ങൾ തേടിയുള്ള അന്വേഷണത്തിൻ്റെ ഭാഗമായിട്ടാണ് അദ്ദേഹം അതിലേക്ക് കടന്നു വന്ന്. അതിൽ അദ്ദേഹം വിചാരിക്കുന്നത് പലപ്പോഴും അത്തരമൊരു പാരമ്പര്യത്തിൻ്റെ ഇത്തരം വശങ്ങൾ, മതേതരമായ വശങ്ങൾ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ പ്രകാശനങ്ങൾ, ആഘോഷങ്ങളെ യഥാർത്ഥത്തിൽ ഇന്നത്തെ സാഹചര്യത്തിൽ കൂടുതൽ പ്രകാശനക്ഷമമാക്കുക അല്ലെങ്കിൽ രാഷ്ട്രീയ പ്രയോഗങ്ങളാക്കി മാറ്റുന്നതിൽ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ദൈനംദിന ജീവിതത്തിൻ്റെ നമ്മളുടെ പൗരജീവിതത്തിൻ്റെ ഭാഗമാക്കി മാറ്റാൻ കഴിയാതിരുന്നതിൽ വലിയ രീതിയിൽ തന്നെ ഇന്ത്യയിലെ പുരോഗമന പ്രസ്ഥാനങ്ങൾക്ക് സംഭവിച്ച പരാജയത്തെ കൂടി അദ്ദേഹം ചൂണ്ടിക്കാണിക്കും. ഒപ്പം തന്നെ ഇത്തരം ഈ വളരെ പലതരം പ്രദേശങ്ങളും ജാതികളും വിശ്വാസങ്ങളും കൂടിക്കലരുന്ന അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അതിൻ്റെ അതിർത്തികളെ ലംഘിക്കുന്ന രീതിയിൽ ഗുരുപരമ്പരകളുടെ ഒരു പാരമ്പര്യത്തെക്കുറിച്ചും അദ്ദേഹം സൂചിപ്പിച്ചു. ഒരു പക്ഷേ ഇതൊക്കെ ആയിരിക്കും ഇത്തരം അൻഹദ് എന്ന് വിളിക്കാവുന്ന ഒരു ട്രഡീഷൻ്റെ അതിർത്തികളെ അതിവർത്തിക്കുന്ന ഒരു പാരമ്പര്യത്തെക്കുറിച്ചുള്ള അന്വേഷണത്തിൽ പ്രസക്തമായിരിക്കുക എന്നാണ് അദ്ദേഹം പറഞ്ഞത്. Then I'll move on to Dilip Raj, who is a teacher of philosophy, critic and writer.
I think this notion of transcending the categories, transcending the boundaries, and finding a new vocabulary to speak about certain things, or finding a lack in our current vocabulary, should start by looking at the formats in which we engage in debates. For instance, in this format, what's the origin of this format? This signifies the public use of reason, I suppose. In the sense, I am making claims, all the panelists are making claims, and there is a moderator with the hope that we will arrive at a unified consensus through the public use of the reason. So for me, I'm not saying that you should necessarily arrive at, but there is this presupposition of the use of reason without relying on any external authority in tradition or in scriptures or anything else. So for me, while looking at this format itself, or looking for alternate templates or formats, would be a good way to begin to think. Because in his introduction to Ashish Nandi Omnibus, D.R. Nagaraj points to an interesting feature about Ashish Nandi's writing. He, being a staunch critic of Eurocentrism, why is he resorting to the same format, the long essay format? Why don't you resort to the anecdotal writings in Indian tradition, he asked in a friendly talk, which gets sidelined by Nandi's response, I suppose. And he goes on to ask another question which is significant in the sense, Nagaraj says, if it is legitimate to look at past through the categories of present, shouldn't it be equally legitimate to look at present through the categories of the past? Like, shouldn't we be able to study about the violence in South Asia through Sufi categories? He poses this significant question. For me, it is significant because it raises or it points at the methodological slumber, I would say. Because we, being the products of a certain process, we are thinking about the constitutive categories which formed us. How is it possible without being limited by the limits of this language, this vocabulary, which constituted us? So while looking at the sources, different sources in our own tradition or our own habitus, our own life world, I would just like to point out one or two instances. As moderator has pointed out, this confronts the contemporary situation. So there is a context to our thinking. So I would like to read a dialogue between Srinarayana Guru and a Shishya. Guru speaks about his sannyasa. So he made a remark like this to his Shishya. We should be praying for the victory of British. They are the gurus who gifted sannyasa to us. Then naturally the Shishya, the devotee, get embarrassed and asks. Usually the procedure is to initiate by giving saffron cloth or by reciting mantras. Then Guru explains, even in the time of Sri Rama, Shudras were not allowed to become sannyasis. Doesn't Hindus rule by the Srutis? So this dialogue, a philosopher coming face to face with his context. So there is a colonial context in which, as you refer to the Advaita became prominent in Indian thinking traditions only during the nationalist period, because we needed a strong, constant self to counter invasion from the outside. The Buddhist traditions of Anatmavada, which problematizes the very self, isn't enabling in such a context. So I think in different thinking traditions in India, philosophy itself as a discipline became prominent in the nationalist period in order to counter this colonial invasion. Thus the Hindustani music or the Mughal architecture or the Urdu poetry, all which forms great sources of creative expressions in India, got sidelined, and philosophy got a prime place. So my observation in this context would be like something like this. Secularism is one of the categories in an ensemble which come as a package deal. So when we speak about secular, certain other things like rationality, modernity, and all these other things come as a package. We are forced to bound by those things. So when we are entering into such a discourse in this format, it's a tradition in which if somebody argues with you, they will argue for days and days. There is no limit like half an hour. There won't be a slip coming from the organizer to the moderator. So aren't we trapped in formats and life worlds which are the impact of colonialism on us? Even after decolonizing, aren't we caught in categories and constituent ideas which formed us and which is part of our life world? I am not saying that, we can go to a pure, native alternative. We are given all these languages and all these categories around us to articulate ourselves. And can we do, what is the test of these procedures by which we can negotiate differences? As Badiou points out in ethics, one of his works, Ethics, he says there are certain differences which agree to negotiate. Suppose there is a person in this panel who is that against liberal ideas, that against democracy, that against, who believes that differences should be abolished. Differences should be, shouldn't be negotiated. What will be our approach towards such a position in such a forum? That is the test of democracy in the sense negotiating differences. I think I should pause that for the time being. മലയാളത്തിൽ സമ്മറൈസ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറഞ്ഞിട്ട് അത് ചുരുക്കി പറയാം. നമ്മൾ ചർച്ച ചെയ്യുന്ന ഈ രൂപം തന്നെ ആധുനികതയുടെയും മതേതരത്വത്തിൻ്റെയും സൃഷ്ടിയല്ലേ? യുക്തിയുടെ പ്രയോഗത്തിലൂടെ ആളുകൾ തമ്മിൽ സമവായം ഉണ്ടാക്കാൻ പറ്റും. പരസ്യമായിട്ട് യുക്തി പ്രയോഗിക്കുന്നതിലൂടെ ഒരു പൊതു സമവായത്തിലേക്ക് എത്താൻ പറ്റും. പാരമ്പര്യത്തിൻ്റെയോ ഏതെങ്കിലും സ്ക്രിപ്റ്റേഴ്സിൻ്റെയോ ഏതെങ്കിലും ഗ്രന്ഥങ്ങളുടെ ആധികാരികത ഉയർത്തിപ്പിടിക്കാതെ സ്വന്തം യുക്തി മാത്രം ഉപയോഗിച്ചുകൊണ്ടുള്ള ഒരു ആശയ സംവേദനത്തിലൂടെ ഒരു സമവായത്തിലേക്ക് എത്തിച്ചേരാൻ പറ്റുമെന്നുള്ള ഈ ധാരണ തന്നെ ഏറ്റവും സെക്യുലർ ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു ധാരണയാണ്. അപ്പോൾ ഈ ഫോർമാറ്റിൽ നിന്നുകൊണ്ട് അതിരുകളെ മറികടക്കുക എന്ന അർത്ഥത്തിൽ അൻഹദ് എന്നുള്ളതിനെ കാണുകയാണെങ്കിൽ ഒരു ട്രാൻസ് സെക്യുലർ ആയിട്ടുള്ള മതേതര ഉത്തരമായിട്ടുള്ള മതേതരത്വത്തിന് ശേഷമുള്ള ഒരു ലോകത്തെ സങ്കല്പിക്കുക സാധ്യമാണോ? എന്തൊക്കെയാണ് നമ്മളുടെ പാരമ്പര്യത്തിൽ ഇതിനെ സഹായിക്കുന്ന ഉറവിടങ്ങൾ എന്തൊക്കെയാണ് എന്ന് വെച്ച് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ, ആധുനിക മതേതരത്വം വന്നിട്ടുള്ളത് ഒറ്റയ്ക്കല്ല. മതേതരത്വം ഒറ്റയ്ക്കല്ല വന്നില്ല. അതിൻ്റെ കൂടെ ജനാധിപത്യമുണ്ട്, ആധുനികതയുണ്ട്, യുക്തിയുണ്ട്, ശാസ്ത്രീയ മെത്തഡോളജിയുടെ ഒരു പ്രാമാണികതയുണ്ട്. ഇതെല്ലാം ഒരുമിച്ചാണ് വന്നിട്ടുള്ളത്. ഒരു പാക്കേജ് ഡീലാണ്. അതിലേതെങ്കിലും ഒന്ന് മാത്രമായിട്ട് നമുക്ക് മറികടക്കാൻ പറ്റുമോ എന്നുള്ളൊരു പ്രശ്നമാണ് ഞാൻ റേസ് ചെയ്യാൻ ശ്രമിച്ചത്. പറഞ്ഞതിൻ്റെ മലയാളമായിട്ടില്ലെന്ന് തോന്നുന്നു.
Okay, thank you, Dilip. I think we have all the panelists have had first round of their insights. I think to start to take off from what Dilip was saying, I think are we trapped into certain formats which we assume to be universal and as if secularism has a kind of language which we can easily adopt for any kind of situations. Second thing is, I think one kind of way to look at it would be is inherent in the very title itself. I would take this biosis and fabric. Biosis has something biological about it, and fabric is something made, something woven together, and it has some kind of textures, and it has some use. We may change fabric also, so. Can you move? Talking about biosis, maybe the kind of the way in which you are talking about tradition. What kinds of sources can we use? Because any kind of historicizing or looking at the present through the past or looking at the past from the present, whatever it may be, has, you can draw on different kinds of traditions. You can create histories as, according to your ideological predilections or whatever. So the question now is to go back to our theme, what are the kinds of ways in which our cultural, symbiotic practices dealt with these things? How did it actually address the question of being critical of one's own methodologies, and also to differentiate between traditions of dissonance as well as of, consonance or symphony. Yeah.
Actually, there is a big debate is there in India on the word secularism or the concept of secularism. We can give up that word, but there is a kind of secularism. We have to find out our own words, own paribhasha to address it in our people's life. Before this word we invent, there is a life, because from so many centuries in India, so many religions, they live together. People belongs to many religions. They share their experience, cultural practices, and Indian fabric itself is pluralistic. Of course, it may look very cliche that we belongs to multilingual, multicultural, multi-religious society, but it is true enough. True enough. My concern is, right now in India, this multi has become a problematic. You have to live with your own one single identity, Muslim or Hindu or Christian. So this multilingual, multicultural, multi-religious identities have been they are sidelining. They are very vulnerable, and the severe attacks on these communities, these cultural practices is there. If we lose this kind of practices, cultural practices, we may lose India. This is my fear, because India's strength lies with this pluralism, pluralistic society. My mother tongue is Urdu. I am a lecturer of Kannada, but with many difficulties, I am speaking in English. So we have to cross so many hads. Simolangana. Anhad means Simolangana. Without Simolangana, there is no creativity. I think to this fanaticism, to this bigoticism, our art forms have answered very well. From last 6 to 7 centuries, Hindustani music, we see so many Khans who sang Hindustani music. The chiefs usually they praise Devata, any Kali or Bhagavad, any Hindu god. They never bother. But right now, it's difficult to find Khans or Muslims in Hindustani music. Why this disappearance? When Amir Bai went to Filmland, between 1940 to 48, she was a very favorite singer to Mahatma Gandhi ji, because she sang a Gujarati song of a Gujarati saint, Narsi Mehta. Vaishnava Jana to Tene, Vaishnava Jana. Between 1940 and 40 to 48, Vijay Bhatt produced 10 movies on Ramayana. In all the movies, Amir Bai was heroine. So such a tolerant, such a give and take culture was also there in Filmland, also there in music. Aladia Khan was a temple singer in Kolhapur, Mahalakshmi temple. But it is difficult to assume now. In recent days, I had been to Nagur in Tamil Nadu, where in a Sufi dargah, Nagore Sharif, Hindus are playing Shahnai, Nagaswaram, and I think, is it Lakshmi, you wrote on Seven Hills and Seven Hills? Yeah. In that book, you have introduced a Muslim lady who plays Shahnai in Hindu temple. I'm sorry, Nagaswaram. So India had a very big tradition of crossing this religious border and taking and giving philosophies, culture, music, etc., etc. But today, for so many reasons, we are pushing our society towards monolithic, culturally monolithic, less tolerant. This is a big challenge against before all the languages, all the writers, all the artists, I think so.
Want to add anything, Priya? Want to add something?
I would like to begin from where he ended. Isn't there a causal connection between the so-called secular, democratic, modern procedures of state and this trend towards unification? I'm thinking because, as both of you rightly pointed out, the fluidity in identities in pre-modern, the so-called pre-colonial period, the way in which people lived, I wouldn't say harmoniously because caste system was there. It was so hierarchical, but even then it was plural. When we look at Ashish Nandi's study on Gujarat census in 1921, I suppose, 1911, he says 2 lakh people there opted being marked as Muhammadan Hindus, because some of their life world, some of the practices falls under the so-called Hindu, and some of, the food habits or the rituals fall under Muslim. So isn't this modern secular institution called census itself demanding an oppositional binary like Hindu or Muslim? You cannot be both at the same time, which you were able to live in the pre-modern period. I'm not, glorifying the past, but I'm saying, isn't secularism and the so-called modern mechanisms and strategies have a constitutive role in ruling out all these fluidities and demanding a oppositional binary? If we are careful not to make secular and non-secular or secular and sacred oppositional as well, I think we can see reasons working in our traditions, and we can see notions of sacredness in the origin of the so-called secularism in the West. I would like to place one of my favorite thinkers, Raimundo Panikkar, who points out at this. When he speaks about human rights, he says, there was a debate in UN while drafting the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, whether it should be termed universal or international. So many of the member states argue that it should be international, not universal. And he points out one remark made by, one proclamation made by the Indonesian president, I suppose, who said, Asian values are universal values, and European values are European values. So Raimundo Panikkar is pointing to the fact that even if colonialism doesn't occur, there should be movements in there should be internal moves drawing on our own sources to claim human dignity. So by 1920s, almost 85% of the globe were under the rule of few European countries. So even after the so-called decolonization, are we thinking, because the problem Raimundo Panikkar finds with this is something like this. He says, if we suppose that this is universal, human rights are universal, there will be an adjacent or an additional premise that European institutions are necessary in order to ensure that human rights are secured. So we will think that European institutions should come in place in order to, the language in which we address the questions, the language in which we make claims. So it will necessitate European institutions. So in that sense, I agree with you that we should think in a I wouldn't say anti-modern or anti-secular or counter-secular, but a trans-secular terms. I don't know what that might be, but that's the challenge now, because easily we will get branded or labeled like anti-secular or whoever. Because for me, the challenge to put it in one sentence would be to imagine a non-violent plural society in which religion is present and communalism is not present. I think our secular as well as Marxist paradigms have failed in imagining such a space where religion is legitimately present but communalism is absent. That is what I find as a challenge.
I agree with that. One cannot oppose secularism as opposed to something else. Because throughout, even when the Sufis lived, they lived with rigidities and fluidity. Like when Kabir died, the Muslims claimed that he is a Muslim, we are going to bury him. And the Hindus said he is a Hindu, we are going to cremate him. Then Kabir's voice appeared and it said that remove the cloth from the body and see. So they removed the cloth and they found just flowers there. Kabir's body was not there. So these people were not giving up. So half the flowers the Muslims took and buried it. And half the flowers the Hindus took and cremated it. So I feel that even when the Sufis lived and spoke about the fluidity of identity, there have been rigidities. So I feel that the fluidity and rigidity is part of life that will remain. But the main question is how much of the rigidity is going to affect our everyday life? That is the question we are asking. Not to finally find a solution. I don't think that's possible because throughout history we have been fighting against this, like how to come beyond boundary. So that that's what I think. That to understand boundaries and to go beyond boundaries and to live in a space where boundaries don't affect the others. It's not that we should not have an identity, we can have an identity. But whether that identity is going to affect someone else's living, I think that's what we are trying to question.
Yes, I think we can take some questions if there are any. Yeah. Mike.
Hello. Good morning, all of you. First of all, I introduce myself. I am Karuvalur Mohanan. I am participated in so many seminars and debates. I will come before you to participate national seminar, Shive. Before that, I will participate 2040, same seminar. I am going to ask you two questions. What are the problems faced by the secularism and the term democracy? And second question is, what are the advantages and the disadvantages of Sufism? Please explain. Thank you.
Anybody wants to respond? The problems faced by contemporary secularism and democracy, and also the advantages and disadvantages of Sufism. Advantages and disadvantages.
You want meaning of Sufism? Okay. Yes, Sufi, it is told that there are so many derivation. It came from Sophia, it came from Saf, and so many. But one of the popular definition is, it must be Greek word, Sophia, love. Love. You can see this word in theosophy, etc. Love. So the basic principle of Sufism is ishq haq, the love. Sufis become in India very popular. They become very popular because of they reached out people with this concept, love. Therefore, they crossed the borders. In Karnataka, we have a Sufi, Bilaya, I was telling, his name is Aminuddin Allah. I forgot to tell that the original philosophers of that is Mansur al-Hallaj, from Baghdad, 10th century, an al-Haq philosopher. He accepted a Shishya from Lingayat community, Veera Sangaya, and gave his name Fakireshwara. So in their philosophy, in their daily behavior, we see they cross this religious border. The Ishq is the... Because they conceive God, they try to Paratatva, what we call in Paratatva, with the means of love. One of the... I had been to Bengal. I saw a... not peculiar, which is real India. In Brahma Chaitanya Pantha, the Baul singers in Bengal, they sing Radha Krishna songs, love songs. Throughout Indian Sufi literature, we see the love songs, love poems. The Baul sing Radha Krishna love songs written by a Sufi from Bangladesh, now Bangladesh, Lalun Fakir. This is very common in Sufism. As far as democracy and secularism question, I think you have to...
I don't think we have to answer all the questions. Huge questions, actually. So it doesn't fall within the purview of our this. Any more questions? One second.
After demolishing Babari, there was a cultural balancing in our film industry and literature. As we have seen in world level, Islamophobia concept and anti-Islamic such things. In this India, now we are very proud of our pluralistic concept and our Indian model of secularism. But still, this type of culture balancing, I mean, if the hero is a Muslim, we want to make the villain also a Muslim, such things. A sympathy, we want to give them sympathy. The Indian people or the literature and the film industry, everything is with is Muslim concept. And but this make many things, mistakes. They misrepresented the terms of Islam, Quran, Jihad, scarf, niqab, and everything. That is the problem. This cultural balance, and what do you think about that? And the things, tasawwuf, it's a very discussable thing. And now you spoke here about a secular spirituality, not the tasawwuf in Islamic meaning, I think. Because that's why we read, we define the tasawwuf and Sufism, and we try to read with the darshan of Advaita and Hallas and Al-Haq. That is very entirely different from Advaita darshan, I think. And the time is very short. That's the question is, what do you think about that? Cultural balancing.
That's why I started by saying that secularism forms part of an ensemble of other ideas in which nation state is a crucial category. Because can you imagine a nation state without also imagining that there is a majority? There is an ethnic majority which forms. When we speak about Indian culture, we are thinking in terms of a majoritarian sense, in the sense, why isn't it that we consider the Sufi or the Hindustani music as our great heritage? We are considering Indian philosophy as the defining feature of Indianness. In the sense, otherwise, it will be like saying that giving in to the very idea of India, the Mughal contribution in architecture or the Urdu poetry. These are, because as he elaborated, in Hindustani music or in Carnatic music, we are borrowing from the West, from our strengths. unlike in the philosophy, because always in philosophy we see, as in one of the studies done by a Malayali, Muralidharan, points out, there is this convertibility. S. Radhakrishnan, Hiriyanna, and others in the nationalist movement period wrote on Indian philosophy, constructed a tradition out of the text in the past in such a way that they translated Brahman as absolute. Why? It's a simple, there is a simple answer, because in their period, Hegel was the glamour boy in European philosophy. So simply converted Brahman into absolute. If you come to the Kerala context, Srinarayana Guru's terms, my friends in the academy like Uday Kumar, when he translated Udal as body, I had this problem, because body and in a continental tradition we have these binaries like body and mind, or you can problematize this. Once you translate Udal as body, the pre-modern classifications in which body doesn't appear in binaries as two. There are classification systems in which 5 things are clubbed together, 8 things are clubbed together. So there are entirely different classificatory schemes in which such words occur. So why don't we use Udal as such, Brahman as such, as we use Dasein in the German word in English? I am raising this question because this convertibility, now we fashionably translate our terms into the postmodern jargons. So we are not borrowing, we are not engaging with the philosophies in the West from a position of strength. That is my point. Unlike in music, unlike in other creative endeavors in which the invasion of these Western influences are much less. And I am raising this question of nation state in the sense, as Arjun Appadure has pointed out in his work, the fear of small numbers. Wherever there is violence, violence is constitutive of identities. It's not the other way around. Like we have identities pre-formed and we enter into violence. No, it's the other way around. Most often, the Islam or the Pan identities come into the localities, neighborhoods, through this violence. Because the Babri is a crucial example which Appadure also points to. Because when the Mandal Commission report and its repercussions happened in India, it was exposed that there is nothing called Hindu majority here. It is divided. There is the Hindu upper caste, Savarna, are numerically a minority. That was exposed. So they needed another against which they can build this unified Hindu identity. So they consciously demolished Babri Masjid and posing Muslim as the other, they constructed this Hindu identity. So the identities are all, most of the time, the results and after effects of such riots and violence. It's not the other way around. We shouldn't presuppose that Hindus and Muslims existed from time immemorial. That's my submission. While I said that we shouldn't extend the categories of the present, categories of the census, British census, like Hindu and Christian, to the pre-modern times and distant past.
May I have a question, please? Well, at the beginning of the talk, I suppose Mr. Relmuth spoke earlier as though the multicultural, that easily. Number two, Mr. Dilip, I think, if I got your name right, suggested that everything can be got over if we can approach the center through a rational, using your reason. That again, I don't think all these years has proved effective. Possibly Mrs. Madam Lakshmi said earlier, referring to the death of a Sufi and how there was no agreement between the two communities as to whether he was to be buried or whether he was to be cremated. And you heard that interesting story. That shows again the present intolerance, which is still very persistent, do we have any way out of it? I think you suggested at the end that that trans idea, not counter or anti, but trans culturalism should be above everything else. Minor boundaries need not be there. There I thought was some way out. In answer to the question earlier raised, whether there is an idiom possible, whether there is a style possible to get over. Thank you.
Anhad into trans. I mean, just trying to translate anhad as trans. It's context.
Yeah, I think one point that came out is that one about cultural symbols as well as secularism, secular fabric, is that about differences and identities. And again, this notion of overcoming the notion that all differences are oppositional. Differences are differences. That they are not necessarily oppositional. They can be, different. That's all. That doesn't mean because somebody is different from me, he's not against me. He's not oppositional to me. But there can be fraternal differences. People can be, you can, share different identities. You can converse with different identities, dialogue with different identities without being oppositional. So maybe this whole question of cultural symbols as well as secular fabric could be one way in which you address differences. And also, as Lakshmi is saying, like to address and transcend it, you also have to know the differences. So I think with this note, I think this has opened up a lot of questions which nobody can tie up or conclude or come to certain conclusions or arrive at the path. But it's a kind of a part of a search where a lot of questions are opened up, a lot of ways and illuminations can be, explored. I think this is a good session. I thank all the panelists for, presenting their views, and also the participants for this patient hearing and also participation. Thank you.